Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
It's so early. I think this is... It's too early. Too early, okay. I want to be a hummingbird. I want to be a hummingbird. Lightness of a feather on me comfort. I want to be a hummingbird. I want to see Lake Michigan. I want to see Lake Michigan. I want to feel so young again. I want to see Lake Michigan. Mississippi River flow, and the world keeps turning slow. I guess it's time for me to go. Mississippi River flow. How are you this morning?
I'm a little sleepy.
Me too. My voice is not.
It's about 4 in the morning.
Got
Yeah, I mean,
a phlegm.
we're super early this morning. My eyes are glued shut with
I got a lot of phlegm.
phlegm.
Yeah, it says the listener's fault.
I think some of it got in my eye while you were singing because my eyes are glued shut with some kind of secretion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in anything. Pine trees are good and those birds can't sing. Don't believe in anything. I can sail the Rio Grande and all them places made of sand. Give my body back onto the land. I understand the Rio Grande. And if you know where we're going, Yeah, I got so much fun. I blame this on the it's the a lot of the plants are trying to come back because the winter is not in its fullness.
Oh, we're about to get into sniffing season.
Well, we're not really there. We are in some parts of the world, but the plants are just sort of pretending that they think that they will resurrect from the dead.
Sure.
Mm. And the plants are terrible people.
Yeah, I've
that
always thought so.
Every year assault people's ability to breathe. They're really like the first coronavirus plants. And I don't know why people tolerate them or like them.
Mm.
People plant them in their houses and they plant them on purpose. When if you ever go to the desert, everyone with allergies just breathes perfectly fine with no plants.
Is that true? Because they have the red cedar pollen out there.
Not in everywhere. If you're just not around red cedar.
Well, granted.
You get out in the middle of Death Valley.
Mm-hmm.
It's just easy life.
Yeah.
There's no mucus.
Mm-hmm.
There's no coughing. If you have allergies, move to the desert, and it's amazing. Because all the plants are dead. And that's my policy for America in the springtime.
Kill all the plants?
Kill all the plants. But today I'm...
Part of your platform?
Yeah, that's part of my platform. Today, we're going to solve Vatican II.
All right.
We're going to solve Vatican II. And then maybe we'll talk about, is the Mars rover real?
Okay.
And I think that it probably is. Just throw that out there so people aren't like, oh, we're going to another show. But I just like to give, what do you call it? I like to give a platform to people that have deplatformed elsewhere.
Sure.
And ideas deplatformed elsewhere.
That's good. You're a kind and generous man.
And one of the ideas that's been deplatformed is that the Mars rover pictures are just coming from Devon Island off the coast of northern Canada. So I'm going to give that a platform, and we'll see. And then maybe we'll talk about, is Trump literally the devil?
That's a turn. Okay. Excellent.
And then, yeah. And then that'll be good. So, but first we're going to solve Vatican II. I thought we'd do the meaty bit first today.
All right.
Because of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I was reading my friend Arturo Vasquez, who is a man on the Twitter.
Oh yes.
And he is an interesting fellow in that he is what would you call him? He was at one point in seminary to be a Catholic priest, but is now a practicing Hare Krishna. Which isn't a move people make very often.
Mm.
They don't go from Catholicism to Hinduism with very much regularity. I mean, maybe in India they do.
Sure.
But it's like a Hispanic man in America.
Mm-hmm.
Not frequent, right? But he writes blogs, and he's one of the few people still writing text. And he writes blogs, and sometimes I read them, and they're pretty smart. And he wrote one called On the Reform of the Reform, and it got me thinking about the traditionalist versus modernist fight.
Okay.
I think we're gonna solve it today.
Awesome.
I think we're gonna put it to bed.
It's gonna be a big day for Catholicism.
We're gonna wrap up, and Protestantism too. I got everybody here.
Sweet.
And we're gonna everything's gonna be. We're gonna take the Pope Pius the whatever people. And they're gonna have their Latin Mass, right inside of the church with the puppets for the cantor or whatever.
Wow,
it's gonna be great. Everyone's gonna come together. Okay, so let's Smokestack. Why don't you describe to the people what Vatican II was, if they don't know?
I don't know anything about Vatican II.
What?
Dude, I'm
What?
I'm like 100% Protestant.
I know, but you should still know about this ridiculous thing.
Okay, let me try. Here's the
Okay.
Protestant ignoramus view of Vatican II. There was a big meeting of, bishops, and they said, "Hey, we need to do away with all this fussy Latin stuff, and we're going to introduce a more accessible and modern version of the Mass to the people, and we're going to make everybody use it. And we're probably going to change some doctrine, even though it's not really changing doctrine because the doctrine never changes." And it made a lot of people upset. How's that?
That's not a bad summary.
Okay, sweet.
So in between 1962 and 1965. So in 1962, the Pope got up there and he was like, or maybe 61, I don't remember, but he got up there and he was like, "Listen, guys, everyone come to Rome. We're all going to meet at the Vatican. All the bishops, everyone that wears a special hat, everyone that has a red hat that's a cardinal, everyone that has a fancy hat, come here, and we're going to all discuss. We're going to discuss, and we'll have a big meeting, and we're going to talk about changes we're going to make to the church." Why? Because it's the new era. It's with the 20th century. World War II is behind us. We're gonna update with the times. The boomers are cool. They've got LSD and John Denver, and we're just gonna go with them, right?
Sweet.
We're gonna put on our bell bottoms also.
Sounds groovy.
It's groovy. It was a groovy conference. Now, as you said, important to note, they did not, at least on paper, change any church doctrines or beliefs, just outward actions and rituals. But, as we've pointed out before on the show, practice and belief go together. Praxis and belief are, like, if you have weird praxis, you always have heterodoxy. You can't change the liturgy, your style of worship, without also changing your beliefs. I don't think it's not possible. Because on paper maybe they all remain the same, but it gets interpreted in a new way. Like, say you have, let's pretend that me and you worshipped Crom. Okay.
I worship Crom.
Right, we worship Crom, and we go to worship Crom every day for 1,000 years. By taking one of the captives from one of the local tribes that we've raided and cutting off their head and smashing it with a hammer on Crom's altar. Okay? But then, in 1960, we have a meeting. We say, we're going to update a little bit. And then we come to Crom's, after that, we come to Crom's altar. And we say, well, now listen, we're updating, but we're not changing any of our beliefs. But then we're going to come to Crom's altar, and we're going to put flowers on it and ask if it's okay that we're not being nicer to women.
I worship Crom?
Right. So wouldn't that be a different religion? Like, if the praxis changes that much, you sort of have a different view on who you're worshiping, right? And so the practice of Catholicism changes pretty radically.
Yeah.
They had this thing called a new mass, the Novus Ordo, which I think is Latin for bad poetry. was written down. And they had all this, these new rubrics and all this stuff. And it was no longer in Latin anymore. It was in the vernacular, whatever the local native language was. Like, if you're in England, it's English, and German in Germany, and so on. And not many Latin masses are there anymore. And this very upset a lot of people, like Tolkien, for instance, who, the story goes, to the day he died, would refuse to speak it in English. And when the priest would say, like, his and peace be with you, upon you, instead of replying, and also with you from the congregation, he would do so in Latin.
Right on.
Just as a protest.
Yeah, man.
Because he was a guy that liked languages, right? And he was like, don't, you don't know what you're messing with here. So it upset quite a lot of people. But a lot of people also liked it. There's a lot of other changes, like in the old Mass, the priest would perform his rituals of consecrating the sacraments facing away from the congregation, what's called ad orientem, right, facing east.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it wasn't really east most of the time, it was symbolically east. In the new one, he turns facing towards the congregation, like metaphorically west. And at this time, a lot of churches began to take on a more in-the-round style of architecture, or at least pew setup,
Yep.
Like, in the old way, there was, you have the altar, and then the priest, and then the people, in a nice linear line. And now we've got a lot of, like, the priest is in the center, and all the actions in the center, and the people are sort of sitting around in a circle, and maybe the church is actually built in a circle, or a semicircle. And if it's not, if they're still using an older one, they sort of rearrange the chairs so that it's more circular. They made more room for the lay people. They decided it would be good for, like, having laymen come up and read the Bible. And they also really wanted women to participate. Like, they wanted them to come up and read and sing. And they couldn't and still can't, as of right this minute, although people talk about it all the time, be priests or deacons. But they could, like, read from the scriptures in Mass. Could be altar girls and so on. And it took on, like, a different posture towards other religions and other confessions of Christianity. Like, though it might still, again, on paper, be the old way, in practice, it now felt like, being Catholic's a good way to get to heaven.
Right.
Maybe even the best way.
Yep.
But if you were, say, a Hare Krishna, for example, it didn't make that much difference. You could still get there. And is there that much of a difference between us and the Jews anyway? Right. And that's just some of the changes. There was taken together. There was a lot of changes, and it sort of moved It sort of moved the church away from this sort of rigid, we're right and we know it, to a sort of inclusive, softer, some might say more feminine, I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's okay sort of thing.
Right.
And I don't think it's too much of an overstatement to say they were revolutionary changes. Like, it really made a big... I think if you went back in time, you're sort of sitting in a different sort of church. Like, if you went back and went to Mass in, like, 1930.
Yep.
And you can see that because, in practice, a schism has actually happened. Because if you go to, like, a traditional Latin Mass parish, and you talk to the people there, what they're practicing is very different from what you get at the local English-speaking church on Sunday. It's just night and day difference. Like, for one, no one at the English-speaking is wearing a doublet. Right?
A doublet?
Right, because
Like
a lot
medieval...
of the Latin Mass people are also medieval LARPers.
Are you being serious?
Oh, yeah. But
awesome.
They tend to take the traditional Latin Mass people tend to take their faith more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Although that doesn't mean that they, like, sin less or anything.
Sure.
It just means that they're more angry about it. And they have a more protocol and decorum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll give you an example. So, like, present day, Biden is ostensibly a Catholic. Okay. He goes to Mass every Sunday, supposedly. Okay. Pre-Vatican II, this would not have been possible. Because he would have been denied having communion for his stances on abortion and trans issues and gay marriage and so on. Right?
Right.
again, technically on paper, these things are still condemned by the church. But in practice, they are accepted, because on paper, accepting any of those things and promoting them as a public official is a mortal sin that can damn you to hell. And you're supposed to repent publicly if the sin is public before receiving communion in the church.
Right.
It'd be like if you got up there and said, Jesus is not God, and then he went to Catholic church and got communion. And they would be like, well, is he really in communion with us, right? Is the
church actually addressed this, like, offered any explanation as to why Biden and others are in communion with the church despite this?
They said it would cause scandal if they didn't, or something really weak.
Was that like an unofficial statement, or was that official
statement?
That
was like the college. That was like some bishop said that or something.
Okay.
So I don't think there's been like an official statement, but as close as you're gonna get is they don't want to cause a fuss.
Oh man. Okay.
Which isn't a good look.
No.
So pre-Vatican II, if a Catholic president, like, say, JFK, who died in 1963 in the middle of the Vatican II Council, but if he got up to there and he said, I think homosexual marriage is a public good and should be recognized by the state, he'd have been thrown out of the church in an instant. Pre-Vatican II.
Yep.
And you see this also with the laity as well, because I wasn't alive in the 60s. But people who were tell me that every week, lots of people would abstain from communion because they didn't feel right about it, because they felt there was something they needed to confess or get right with before they did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I won't say they took it more seriously, but with more reverence, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Today, no one abstains ever. It's weird if you abstain. Everyone goes up all the time. Are people sinning less? Probably not. Right? They just don't have the same posture towards the sacraments they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see why. I mean, in many cases, the very shape of the church, like it's the way you're sitting,
yep,
is no longer linear and hierarchical, but more round and equal, and we're all the same here, and everybody's okay. To give a personal example, trees. I've been to confession numerous times and confessed sins that, on paper, again, would be damning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But only to have the priest look at me and, in some cases, actually even scoff and go, "Poof, that's nothing. Don't worry about it."
Really?
Right, like that.
Man.
Like that. And then I'd be like, but, on paper, this is supposedly serious. He's like, and like he was almost annoyed with me even for confessing it,
Wow. Okay.
Like a totally different attitude towards sin, right? And he was a typical Vatican II priest. He's an older sort of boomer guy, hippie-like, wears flip-flops to church, right? That right there is really the whole thing. That's a picture of the whole thing. Pre-Vatican II, no priest would have worn flip-flops to church. And now they wear flip-flops. And that's really a good picture of the difference. Now, importantly, being trad doesn't mean you can also have this happening. Like Biden receives communion even though he's pushing abortion, and Charlemagne received communion even though he had lots of mistresses and everybody knew it. Right? So just being trad doesn't prevent you from being lax on sin.
Sure.
Right? So that can happen. But I think it does help a bit if you're less trad.
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps you be. I could be wrong, but I think it helps you be a little lax on it. Now, again, at the local Latin parish, Latin Mass, there seems to be a lot of adultery confessing going on,
mm-hmm,
from what I hear. So, maybe not, right? But I don't think in pre-Vatican II there would have been like people scoffing at you for confessing sins in the confessional. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, in defense of the trad people, I would say that if I were in that position and trying to hold the line on things, and
Right.
the hierarchy of the church has abandoned all the positions I'm trying to hold, it would be a lot easier for me in a moment of weakness to just say, well, if the Pope doesn't care about this, why should I?
Right. If the Pope worships Pachamama,
Yeah.
why should I care
Yeah.
if I don't know, murder George down the street, murder a baby?
Yeah. I mean, whether we like it or not, the leadership of a church and the hierarchy sort of carry in
They
practice.
set the tone.
They set the tone and they inform the conscience of those below them in a
Right.
practical sense to a large degree.
Yeah, because like, you can't. Well, so one thing that used to be is that pre-Vatican II, it was forbidden for like people to go pray with or participate in other religious services, right? Like,
Mhm.
like you could go like sit in on it, but you couldn't like pray with them or whatever.
Sure.
But then like John Paul's up there just like having a joint service with Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
and that's nice in a way. He's like, hey, but it's also like, well, a lot of the people around the world see that and they say, oh, so the Pope is saying that their worship of God is equally valid.
I mean,
And
right?
whether or not that's intended to be communicated, that is the message that's received.
Right.
And so people are like, well, it's just whatever you're gonna, if you think this, great. If you think that one, great. Whatever works for you. Your truth. We're all going up the same mountain. We just got different paths. Right? That's the sort of idea that. And currently, apparently, Francis is getting ready to host a, quote, interfaith prayer service or something.
On a ziggurat.
On the ziggurat. And then it's like, well, what? That's just, okay. We've jumped the shark now. It's a little jumping the shark. Because if you do that, then it's like, why bother really caring about being... I mean, you're just sort of Catholic because it's what your family does.
Right.
Or you're a lady who is Catholic on her dating app, and that is code for, I want to have a lot of babies. And that's all that means.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, she doesn't really care, like, about the faith in any... she just wants to go to them and have an excuse to have a lot of babies. And have a social network of other women who also have a lot of babies so that they can help her. And that's a good place to find that in some cases is a traditional Catholic church.
Gotcha.
Right? They don't really care. Like, but there's all these, there's all these different things going on. But, so people are just like, it just becomes sort of like, this is just our social clique, right? It doesn't really, there's no like aim towards transcendence or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because why not? Because everyone's equal under the ziggurat. Everyone's equal under the ziggurat, right? And, okay, so on the Protestant side of things, sort of the same thing occurs. Just less formally.
Sure.
Throughout the 60s and 70s. There wasn't this big one big defining Protestant conference where they changed everything on purpose. But it was like several thousand small cuts.
Yeah, we had the Ecumenical Movement, which was a big smear of going crazy.
Right. So, like, example, in a Southern Baptist church in, say, 1957, no one would have been caught dead wearing blue jeans.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not against blue jeans. I'm just making an example of how things have changed.
Sure.
You wore your Sunday best, right? And if you were poor, you saved up and you bought something at least kind of nice to wear to church.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd sing your good old time hymns from your good old time hymnal that were less than 50 years old.
Yep.
And you could have a piano and organ, sure. Or if you were like a Church of Christ or something, a cappella only, right? But a guitar, an electric guitar, let's just ride out. What do you... Get your guitar out of church. And the pastor has flesh tunnel earrings?
Oh, gross.
What?
Oh, gross.
And he's got septum piercings? And 50 years ago, old Miss Betty would have beaten you to death with her walker.
As she should.
You came to church with stud earrings and an electric guitar. Right? She's like, you have to die, demon.
Oh, man.
And would she have been right? Maybe.
Mm.
To beat you to death for your stud earrings and electric guitar. And then the mainline Protestants, same thing.
Yeah.
You know, arguably in some cases, like Methodists, who, no offense, Methodists, but you guys really have to do some fixing.
Oh, they're about to.
You gotta do some fixing.
They're fitting to do some fitting.
Good.
Yeah.
Or the Anglicans.
Yeah.
They're even more down the modernist rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
than the Catholics. I mean, they in some cases they do full gay marriage. Everyone's vegan. They all listen to NPR, right? Which is on par with those other things.
Right.
Super lefty, right? So it's not just a phenomenon affecting Catholics only. It's just sort of sweeping the whole Western world. The Eastern Orthodox don't have it so bad, but they're getting there. We're teaching them.
Well, they never had John D. Rockefeller after them like we did.
Yeah, the Eastern Orthodox, we're slowly teaching them how to be degenerate. They're learning, and we're having our effects a little bit. They have a nice insulation. They have an air gap insulation.
They do.
Because they can't get together and hold a council to make changes without the Armenians excommunicating the Russians. Anytime you put two different Orthodox churches together, they excommunicate each other. Every time. So they can't ever get together and hold a council to, like, make changes.
Right.
So that's an advantage at times. Sometimes it's a disadvantage, but sometimes it's an advantage. And also they have this whole thing of, like, well, the main thing the Eastern Orthodox have going for them is that they never change anything in the liturgy ever.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, you have to say it the same way every time. Forever. And that is an insulation against, like, doing a mass where you have Sesame Street puppets, as has happened. Right?
Yep.
Or having flesh tunnel earrings and an electric guitar with smoke machines, as has also happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
I went to a smoke machine church.
See?
Yeah.
How was it?
It was a little too silly.
Why do we need smoke machines?
Why do we need a lot of things?
Is it for the laser show?
Well, there have also been lasers at times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mine wasn't full, like, Hillsong, but it, you know.
My personal belief is that Jesus does not need lasers.
Yeah, I would concur.
I don't know if he dislikes lasers. I think he probably likes lasers, in general. But there's a time and place for lasers.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so what was behind this general move in the 60s and 70s? And still driving it, really? Why did people do it? Why do they do it still? Why was there this pull for this rounder, softer, less rigid sort of belief system? And then critics will say, oh, they just want to sin and feel okay about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's undoubtedly part of it, right? Not that people haven't ever had much trouble feeling okay about doing bad. That's pretty easy for most people to do.
Sure.
But there's a sort of true motivation in there. And I think if we suss it out, we solve the problem. And then we fix it. And that's what we're going to do. I was talking with this old nun. She's passed on now.
Mm-hmm.
She died from being old. Maybe she died of coronavirus in 2017. I don't know.
Could have happened.
I'm counting her as a corona death. But she said that they all loved Vatican II when she was younger. She said she did never become a nun without Vatican II. Because all her childhood, she went to Mass with her family, and she described it as, quote, dry. Right? She said, young people today want tradition because they've never had it, but it gets old quick. You know, that wasn't her voice. That was me. Pretended to be her.
Okay.
But she said it's the same thing every week. And after a while, people are just going through the motions in rote. There's no like passion behind it, no love of God, just okay. Now I chant the thing, now I swing the incense, now I read the Bible. Now I light the candle, now I give the half-hearted sermon, now I do-ba-do-ba-do. And she said it was all just ritual for ritual's sake. Right? And they wanted to stop doing that. An example, again, from the Protestant world. I grew up around a lot of Church of Christ people who are most people probably never really dealt with the Church of Christ people. They're a small Protestant sect that really is only located in numbers in one geographic area. And sort of like a less successful version of Mormonism, except they don't have space Jesus.
Are they considered a charismatic group?
No, they're the least charismatic people ever that have ever lived.
Okay, I don't know much about them.
They have no personality at all.
Okay.
The personality is sinful.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
I mean, that's a little too much, but no, I kid. But they would not, they would not in general speak in tongues.
Yeah, sure.
And I like the Church of Christ. They were all great people. But they just, like, they would not, like, what they were very, like, to give you an example of how far away they were from, say, or still are actually, from speaking in tongues and rolling around on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
They would not allow, and still don't allow, instruments in church.
Okay.
Just a cappella singing only.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up going to a Church of Christ elementary school. I think the only one that exists in the world. And I was not Church of Christ. They were just the best school in the area, right? And so we would go to this chapel every morning. And again, they're great people. You know, I kid when I say they don't have any personality, but they had these, like, they would not sing with an instrument, right? But then before everyone would sing a cappella, the guy would get up there with a pitch pipe and he'd go, woo, and everyone would go, hum, and then we would sing. And I would sit there and go, wait, you just used an instrument just beforehand. Like that why? And it never made sense to me, and I would always bring that up. Like, I don't. Anyway, that's how far they were from rolling around on the floor.
Sure.
Okay. So there was this, they had at least where I was, they had this peculiar thing of when they had the communion bread and the wine,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was grape juice, but symbolically wine. Because a lot of Protestants don't like the if they're not mainline Protestants, they don't like using alcohol, which is a holdover from Prohibition times.
Right.
But anyway, they would and then on the altar they would cover the bread and wine with this fancy, like, lace towel. You've probably seen something like that.
Yeah, that's about how we do it. We use real wine.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this is true everywhere. Like, there's more variation in Protestant worship styles but where I was, they all had this fancy towel and they'd lay it over the bread and wine. And I remember one time a new fella, because they have this practice where they don't have one preacher, which I like this one a lot. They sort of rotate, like all of the adult men have a different time. Like now it's your turn to preach.
Mm-hmm.
You preach this week, right? And one time there was this new fella, and he came into the church, and it was his job to set up for the service. And he didn't put the lace towel out, right? And they started the service, and about 5-10 minutes in, it just sort of ground to a halt. The people in the pews were just so uncomfortable not having the towel over the bread and wine, they felt weird. And so they stopped, and they went back to the back, got the towel, the lace towel, put it out there, and they carried on. And it would have been fine, except the new guy who'd forgotten to put it out there was sort of like me. Because when most people mess up a social cue, they feel embarrassed about it, they get a little red-faced, and they apologize, and they make sure not to do it again. But this guy, instead, when it was his turn to preach, he jettisoned his sermon, and he said, "Why are you all concerned about this towel thing?"
Oh, no.
Which I was like, oh, good. This is going to be great.
Yeah, man.
And he said, it's a fancy towel, but what's wrong with you? What are you, Catholics?
Oh,
Worried
snap.
about some dumb accoutrement? Right? And it was this big, all of a sudden church was an argument, which I love. I was like sitting there going, this is great.
Did people like speak up and fight with him as he's up there at the
Well,
pulpit?
no, at first because they were taken off guard. You know, when you start an argument,
Right.
you often take people off. It's like you just come out of nowhere and blindside them with a punch.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes him a minute to recuperate. So he's ranting for a minute. And then the people are like, you gotta, and then there's this arguing back and forth, you know. And he's like, well, we just do it. And then he's like, but why? He's like, well, because we want to be respectful. And he said, how is it disrespecting Jesus to not have a lifestyle? You know, and he's going back and forth. And it goes on for a long time. And then no one could answer why it was there when the guy at the front just kept saying, why is it here? And so finally one older guy in the congregation, he said, well, look, when I was little, we didn't have air conditioning. So we had church with the windows open in the summer. He said, and I reckon we got the towel, and we put it on there to keep the flies off. And that was it. The thing that had existed just to keep the flies off had become like this religious object.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of sacred thing. Like, we just did it every week. We put this nice, and they wanted a nice towel because Sunday best, right? You didn't want your blue jeans towel.
Sure.
So they got a nice towel to put it on there. But that had become, it had become the towel for it had become like this religious fetish item almost. Like, they couldn't have, like, the church stopped without it.
So this is a really interesting, can we just pause here for just a second? So there's a lot of people screwing up here, I think. One is the people in the church that had a fetish, that fetishized the towel and couldn't handle it if the towel wasn't there. Okay?
Right.
Because they had taken what was a tradition.
Correct.
And then turned it into, crammed it into their religion somehow. And then you had the guy preaching who had no respect for a tradition as tradition and said, well, this is dumb. I don't understand it, so I'm going to trash it. Mm-hmm. And so it would have been okay if the people who wanted the towel just acknowledged that it's our tradition and traditions are good and they, at their own scale, and they provide a sense of community and familiarity and they help us in the liturgy, and they make everybody feel at home, and it's good. That's a good thing, even if it's not a religious tenet or it's not, part of the religion. It still can be good.
Sure.
You know, it's like, why does it have to be part of the religion to be good, or to be maintained, or to be respected?
Right. Exactly. But so I think this guy's point was, if it is so matters to you so much that you can't worship without it.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree with him.
He was also just being argumentative.
Yeah, he was being a punk, even though he was right.
And it was great. Yeah. He may have been wrong, but it was fantastic.
Sure.
But okay. And that none I was speaking with, she said that's what the whole Catholic Church had become. Everything was just that towel that existed for one point because of the flies.
Sure.
And now had become this religious object on par with or exceeding, like, prayer. Like, we got to do the candle. No one knows why we light the candle now. We just do. And no one knows why the bells are being rung. They just do it. And it sort of became more important than, like, the inward reflection and inward transformation was these exterior things. And she said to me that kind of Catholicism felt like it had run its course. People were just done with it. They were done sitting around ringing bells and being like, what are we even doing? And I see this all the time. You know, like if you go, that's the very common thing in religion is to take something that existed for some practical purpose, like a towel to keep flies off, and then turn it into this religious thing. Right?
Sure.
Like this big, there's this parish up the road from me. They do a public rosary before Mass. And if you go, all you will see is people I can't see what they're doing inside their heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it just looks like, very convincingly looks like it's just people mouthing Hail Marys with nothing behind it. No thought, really.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just saying a rote prayer for the sake of saying the rote prayer. Because a lot of Catholics have this weird... And they're gonna get mad at us because a lot of people really attach they attach a lot of things to the rosary, but they have this weird thing like if they just say the rosary, then they will be purified. And my point is that you gotta actually think about what you're doing. Like you have to actually, you can't just say it with your thoughts being elsewhere.
Right.
Jesus specifically warns against that. He says, "Don't play vain repetitions. Repetition's okay, but don't vain. You gotta everyone says repetition to some degree because people say the Lord's Prayer with some regularity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not over and over again, but like every other day or whatever, every week, every Sunday. But you can't just mouth it, It's like in Shakespeare, in Hamlet, King Claudius, the uncle, who's in private trying to pray for forgiveness for murdering his brother, Hamlet's father. After he finishes praying, he stands up and he says, "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thought ne'er to heaven go."
Mm.
Because he's acknowledging his prayer is invalid, because he's mouthing the words of forgiveness, but his heart's not behind it. He said he's not truly remorseful for what he's done. And so after he finishes praying, he stands up and says, "I don't feel that was taken."
Yeah.
And that's what I think. Like if you're just sitting there mouthing the thing, it doesn't count. Like it doesn't go anywhere. Words fly up, thoughts remain below. Words without thought never to heaven go. And so that becomes a thing. It becomes ritual without thought, ritual for ritual's sake. Easiest thing to do with religion in the world. Every religion and sect and thing is like that. Okay, so in the 60s, people were sort of rightly looking at their religion and saying, wait a minute, we're not doing anything here. We're just mouthing things. We're doing the equivalent of mouthing things. Like, I'm putting on this robe, but there's nothing behind it. There's no, I'm just doing it because we did it before.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there's a value in doing that, but it can't become disconnected totally from the thing, right? So the baby boomers get a lot of flack, but from their perspective, it was like, hey, our stuffy parents and grandparents took religion oh so seriously, but they sure didn't mind starting 2 world wars and burning down half the planet twice. right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you were so. It's like, oh, you're really taking this so seriously, aren't you? Nuclear bomb, boom, 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 and they were like, and they're like, oh, so this is, I mean, when you think of it like that, and the baby boomers are coming out of that world, it's like, oh, I guess that does sort of make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to overstate like the scar World War I and II left on the population, because there's always been wars, but these were like machine wars.
Yeah. Well,
The
that
bodies-
and the
yeah.
West was expected to come out of that war believing that A, the cause was entirely righteous, and B, that we were all a part of that cause together. And
Yeah.
if you accept that, then you, even if you at the time had nothing to do with any of the decisions of going to war or how that war was prosecuted, which is true, normal people had nothing to do with it. After the fact, you bear responsibility for what happened if you pick up that storyline.
Yeah.
And so their children saw them as, guilty of the horrors of World War II ex post facto.
Right. And like someone pointed out to me, just like today when we have all of our propaganda, there's a lot of people going, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
But they don't get any airtime.
True.
And there's also a lot of the masses are largely swayed by the propaganda, just like now. Nothing's new under the sun. And so the people doing these wars on all sides, that's the thing. Like, so they were like, oh yeah, this is, you're all, the baby boomers looked around, they said, the people doing these wars on all sides more or less claim to be followers of Jesus. And they're like, no more of that. No, thank you. And so what did they do? They don't just abandon their religion, to their credit, right? For the most part. I mean, there was an influx of like Eastern mysticism and stuff, but for the most part they didn't. They go back to the text and they look to see, like, looking at it from this new perspective, post-war perspective, and they say, hey man, with their unwashed hair, Jesus was pretty laid back, bro. He was chill. He wasn't like condemning people, man. He forgave people when all the old fogies were like ready to stone them. In church, man, look, the first Eucharist, the Last Supper, it didn't have all these rituals, man. It was just a meal, man. Just friends hanging out and loving each other and stuff. That's what it is, man. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what it is. And the thing about that is, and now I'm going to do a turn, they're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're absolutely correct. This is when you get the like Jesus Christ Superstar movie.
Yep.
Which I am a big fan of.
I've never seen it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. What's the black guy's name that plays Judas?
I don't know.
Carl Henderson, maybe. He can sing it's so good. And the guy that played Jesus, hits like, in the Gethsemane song, I think he hits some absurd like above middle C.
Okay.
It's this absurd note. It's so good. Always thought that I would be apostle. Knew that I would make it if I tried. Then when we retire, we can write the gospel so they'll still talk about us when we've died. Oh, such a good. You gotta get the original version though. I don't like the other ones. They've
There's
redone
more
it
than
like
one?
7 times.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, it's a Broadway play, right? And
Okay.
so there's always like, then this cast did it, and then this cast did it, and then this cast did it. I prefer the original. And the fact that forms the basis of my Lenten meditations.
Oh no.
Is listening to Jesus Christ Superstar. That is my Stations of the Cross.
Oh no, no.
I mean, it sounds a bit, but it's so good. It's like really quite. But anyway, so they're absolutely correct. Like, he was chill, and like the purpose of the Last Supper, the first The first communion was just like, hey, it's just a love fest. They didn't have the rituals right, but you gotta hold your horses. Okay, now here we're getting to it. This is, I think, the solution. So, because so their solution was like, so that's the truth, and so we just got to abandon all these traditions and things, and then we just go to, like, we all sit around with our arms around each other, and we'll pass around the cup, and it's going to be great, right? In Christianity, there's a trope that's largely been forgotten about now in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
I think precisely because the baby boomer take on Christianity no longer needs it, because they're all trying to be it. And it's this take of the holy fool.
Okay.
Right? The holy jester, the holy fool. Jesus actually embodies the holy fool perfectly at sometimes. Like, he's walking around on the one hand claiming, you think I came to abolish the law? No! Not a jot or tittle will be removed until the law is accomplished. On the other hand, he's constantly flaunting the law. Right? He's walking around doing what, per the text on paper, appears to be a violation of that same law.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Picking grain on the Sabbath, not agreeing to stone the woman when she's caught red-handed in adultery, and so on. Like, they're like, those guys are right. They're like, they come and they're like, look, right here in the text that you say it says if you're caught, you have to stone her. Right? And then he appeals to a higher law, or higher interpretation of this law, right?
Mm-hmm.
And many of the great saints of the Christian tradition have also had this habit of doing things where you're like, I'm not really sure if that was right, or even moral, or maybe that was just rude. Right? Their behavior in regards to religious norms and social norms is sometimes seen as abnormal, maybe even shocking. Right?
Okay.
For examples, Saint Simeon of Constantinople used to have to be routinely chased out of church because he would, while they were doing all of their fancy rituals and stuff, he would sit there and he would take chestnuts and he'd throw them at the lamps, trying to extinguish the flames. Because in his time they had also reached a point of ritual for ritual's sake.
Uh-huh.
And he was in many various these holy fool ways, he was trying to say, like, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Put out these candles. These candles have become an obstruction to you, seeing the true light of Christ, right?
Right.
You're focusing on this. Or the Russian Saint Basil of Moscow, who went about completely naked every day throughout the town, summer, spring, winter, or fall. Mm-hmm. Naked in the winter of Russia, mind you.
That's pretty hardcore.
And he would also play Robin Hood and shoplift and give clothing and food to poor people. And you say,
how do you shoplift naked?
Right. He's very good at it, apparently. Or perhaps Saint Francis of Assisi, people like him. And he would wander around in the woods and preach to the trees. Right? And the birds.
Maybe he's just practicing.
Well, no, he felt like they needed to hear also.
Okay.
He said all creation needs to hear the gospel. Because he said all creation is dying to hear it. So he would walk out into the woods and he just preached to the blue jays or whatever. Or even to the rocks. Right? Which is a bit of like weird behavior, we consider. Mm-hmm. Or Brother Juniper, who was a monk. And one of the brothers in his monastery was sick. And he said, my brother, I want to do, anything to help you. What do you need? And that brother really liked to eat pig's feet. Like people do now.
Yeah.
Which I think is gross, but whatever. He said, well, I really like a pig's foot. And Brother Juniper, upon hearing this, gets up, runs to the kitchen, gets a knife, sprints into the woods, and then returned sometime later, having found a herd of pigs, wrestled one to the ground, and cut off a bloody stump. And he says, I've got it for you, brother. And he just left the pig out there to die with its foot cut off.
Oh, man.
Right? So that sort of theme pops up repeatedly among the great saints, this sort of crazy, manic behavior, the holy fool. I would say the Protestant American version of this, the most of this archetype, would be Johnny Appleseed, who really did walk around the country barefoot with a pot on his head, preaching the gospel to people and planting apple trees.
With a pot, so the pot on his head is real? Like he really?
Yeah.
Did that?
Well, that was what he cooked with. He cooked his meals in it, and he just kept it on his head like a hat. When he's walking around. He went barefoot for some reason, and then he would just plant the apple trees and preach out of Matthew to people. So that sort of, I think that's the in the American tradition, that may be one of our holy fools.
Okay.
And you say, okay, fine, Sumo, what's this got to do with the Vatican II and traditionalism versus modernism? Well, it's because the baby boomer insight that the highest form of relationship with God is unprogrammed and personal, and not really ritualistic, is true. Right? That is. Like Jesus' friends, his actual close friends on earth, did not worship him in a stylized manner. In fact, I mean, they didn't wear robes and hats and stuff, right? Later, after he'd left, they may have begun taking up those things, or perhaps their followers did. It's unclear exactly when all that started to happen. But while Christ was here with them, there wasn't any of that.
Sure.
And they even questioned him about such things. They came to him and said, "The disciples of John fast. Why do your disciples not fast?" And he said, "How can the groomsmen fast when the groom is still with them?" Right? And you can't, because they were with Christ, and their worship, the highest form of worship they did their whole lives, truly, was just sitting around being friends with Jesus. Like maybe playing checkers. Yes, they had an early form of checkers at that time. Drinking wine around the table, telling jokes, being silly. That was the highest form of worship they would ever do. And it isn't interesting. It never actually says they worship Jesus, at least in the manner of worship we think today, until after he's resurrected and just about to go back up to heaven. That's interesting. They stopped to worship him in a more like godlike manner, and that's because he's leaving, and so in a sense it's becoming less real. Like their worship is becoming less real because it's more distant. Like the highest form of worship would have been sitting around with him at the Last Supper, and then it becomes more stylized as there's more absence.
Do you think that could be just because they knew more deeply who Christ really was?
It could be, but I mean, some of them, notably Peter, know who he is beforehand, right? In fact, I think all of them probably knew. But see, what we do here is and what we do now is less genuine and powerful than if we were actually God's friends. Like Jesus says, "No longer do I call you servants, now I call you friends." That's what God wants. What God is after is to renew the relationship in the Garden of Eden, where we just walked together and talked in the cool of the day. That's his prized possession. That's the real thing. The closer you get to God, in many ways, the less formal your relationship becomes, which isn't surprising because that's how relationships always work. You are formal with strangers. Hello, sir. Thank you, ma'am. May I please? And that's right and proper when you're getting to know somebody. If you you are formal because you don't love each other yet enough to be informal. When you really know someone, like when you have a good friend, you don't greet them with, "Hello, sir. How are you on this fine day?" In fact, if you did that, it might be offensive. They'd say, "What have I done? Are you mad at me? Why are you treating me like a stranger?" Right? If you have a good friend, you're more likely to be like, "Hey, George, you big goof. I've missed you. What are you doing, you idiot?" Right? That love drops formality. Formality is not for people. It's for people not in love. You don't call your wife Mrs. So-and-so, or, You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
It does. Yeah, but it makes me think that, what we have today, and I guess in the Catholic sense, post-Vatican II, is a ritual of informality.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. So it is with God the same. The better terms you get with God, as you spend more time in prayer, meditating Scripture, clearing away sin, all that stuff, you begin to drop the act a bit, I think. You maybe even wake up in the morning and you talk to God more on a friendly plane, like a little complaining even, like, really? You get up and you're like, you couldn't have shut the dog up last night. I'm exhausted. Good morning anyway. And for his part, I believe God also sort of plays little jokes on you. Like really, like reality and life sort of lose their seriousness and they play a little, and you're like, oh yeah, I get the joke here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Chesterton poem, about the children. The world is ours till sunset, holly, fire, and snow, in the name of our dead brother who loved us long ago. The grown folk mighty and cunning, they write his name in gold, but we can tell a little of the million tales he told. He taught them laws and watchwords to preach and struggle and pray, but he taught us deep within the hayfield the games that angels play. Right? It's sort of like that, because that's the sort of the secret. We read about, like in the Bible, these mighty thrones and the choirs of angels and the heavenly hosts gathered around and worshiping God. And they're going, hallelujah, 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 which means more or less in Hebrew, praise God.
Mm-hmm.
And it all sounds like a very big formal thing. Very serious. And we sing about it like it's very, very serious. And we talk about it like it's very, very serious. But how do you actually use hallelujah when something good happens? Like,
yeah,
something amazing happens. You go, hallelujah, woo! It's the same, like that's the secret. They're using it more like you would say whoopee.
Mm-hmm.
They go, woo! Like if you imagine instead of hallelujah, if you want to get a more adequate picture of heaven, instead of like, because hallelujah has come down through the ages, it's become ritualized, and it has all this baggage. Imagine them instead of singing hallelujah around, it's just saying, whoopee, wee, woo! Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's more of what the angels are doing. Like as Dante said, the song of the angels is the laughter of the universe. Or again, to quote Chesterton, the angels fly because they take themselves so lightly. And so the highest form of worship possible is that, like to sit around having a good time with God. Just as you do with your own good friends on earth, sometimes that gets a little mischievous. You're having a good time with your friends, you get in a little bit of trouble. So with God, like maybe if you're close to God, maybe you're getting a little too many shipwrecks. Like Paul was. He got into some trouble hanging out with God. He got in a little mischief. Maybe sometimes you steal from the rich to give to the poor, like St. Basil. Maybe you're hanging out with God and he wants you to whip some people who are selling things in the church. Maybe, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The holy fool understands. The holy fool really is, in a sense, what Nietzsche tried to be, which is beyond good and evil. He's not, obviously, because God is all good, but those categories start to break down. Because, like, suddenly, maybe, going around naked in public isn't a sin of immodesty. Right? Maybe, as was the case with Christ himself, making a whip and hitting someone isn't the sin. Maybe God is daring you to see if you will actually do whatever it takes to help your sick neighbor, even if it means running out into the woods and wrestling down a pig. Like he's just like, you know what, right now, like, because you get this sense in the Old Testament, people would say a thing, they'd make a pledge, and then they'd do it no matter what happened.
Right.
Even if it was crazy, like when Saul pledges that he will sacrifice whatever comes, through the thing, and it's his son, and is that the story?
No, it wasn't Saul. It was somebody else.
Oh yeah.
It was his
Saul.
daughter.
Yeah. And so he sacrifices his daughter, and you're like, right? And that was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but that sort of idea of like, we're going with it here, right? The people, like holy people, are scary. That's the thing. Like people think they're all nice. Holy men and women are slightly scary because they become more like forces of nature than people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the fire burns in them to go do something, and they go do it with reckless abandon. None of this like weighing pros and cons and being very rational like we normies do. Like the Spirit said to Abraham, go, and he went. No second thoughts. Just the Spirit says, sacrifice your son. Yes, sir. Here we go. Like that's scary. That's a scary person. Who if they get it in their head that God wants them to sacrifice somebody, and they're just like, here we go. Right? Now you have to be careful, because some of you people out there, I know you, will think that God is speaking to you, but you're really just schizophrenic. So just keep that in mind, right? But like think of the things David would do, or Daniel. Like when they get this, that's why Jesus says about the people that are born of the Spirit. He says the wind blows where it will. You cannot tell where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. Yeah,
I mean, King David was a wild man.
Exactly. Like holy people are frightening. It's just like the just pure motion, pure action. It's like a bolt of lightning God sends across the sky. I think that's why Jesus calls James and John sons of thunder, because they were like that. It's like God says to nature, lightning bolt, and it lightning bolts. Mm-hmm. And if God laid an action on the heart of James or John, they just did it. Pure, like just go. Like no second guessing. No like, is this the right thing to do? Just boom. They felt the calling of the Spirit, and off they go. I'm going to go get that pig to help my neighbor and cut his foot off. Or whatever it is. They're just forces of nature. Like people were scared of the apostles, generally terrified. That's why they killed them. They were like frightening people that were like bringing. I mean, James and John were sitting there at one point, you remember, and he says, I forget which one it was, but he turns to Jesus when the people are acting up, the crowds, and he says, should we call down fire from heaven and kill them?
Yeah.
Jesus is like, calm down. Calm down a little bit. Or Elijah, right? Hey, yeah. Baldy, bears.
Yep, send the bears after him.
Right? And like that's intent, but see, that's what. Well, I'm telling like the when you get like that's sort of, well, it suffice to say, holy people can be scary. But you greet strangers and you get to mischief with friends, not with strangers.
Yeah.
Right? And that's so too with God. Like we greet strangers is in a ritualistic way. That's the public ritual. Hello, sir. Hello, please, thank you, so on, right? With real friends, that all breaks down. It's no longer needed because you understand that it's there already. Like, my friends know that I'm thankful for them. I don't have to say it. I do anyway, right, sometimes, but you don't have to. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to say please. Like, I had a best friend growing up. I was at his house all the time. He was at mine. Neither of us had to ask if we could have food in the fridge. We just took it if we wanted it, because what's mine was his and his was mine. Yeah. Just understood. It didn't need to be said. The ritual of asking became superfluous. Because, if you go over to a friend's house for a new friend, and you ask for something, they almost always give it to you. Mm-hmm. You just ask first, right? You say, can I please have some, I don't know, cake? And they give you some cake. Oh, yes, sir. But see, when you actually become closer friends, you don't even ask, right? And this is what people, I think, sort of don't understand. Like, how many times has the joke been made? I don't really want to go to heaven. It doesn't sound that exciting. Who wants to be in church forever? And that's a valid point, because you don't want to be like the rituals, the prayers, and all that. That is the ritual performed between strangers. That's the hello, sir. How are you today? Yes, Mr. God, pleased to meet you. I'm Mr. So-and-so. That's what that is. But you're supposed to move beyond it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying stop go to church, although some very holy men in the past and women have felt the call to need to just wander off in the woods for a while. So your mileage may vary. But I'm just saying that the traditional stuff, which was jettisoned for being too informal, has as its goal precisely that informality.
Right. Now we have fake informality that hasn't been earned.
Exactly. Fake informality that you did not earn. Right? You can't skip the process. Yeah. You can't, it's weird and offensive and dangerous to go up to a stranger you never met and start acting like he's your oldest buddy.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. They get suspicious of you. And that is the same thing with God. Like, you have to go through the hello, sir, how are you? That's what all the ritual was for. And it doesn't, I'm not saying it has to be as ornate as the Latin, but there has to be something.
Mm-hmm.
A level of decorum. A level of the Sunday best. Right? And so some level of that formality it always happens, right? It's required when you start. And that's why, as you said, modern laid-back Christianity, which is informal from the start, feels so fake.
Yeah.
Because they jumped the gun. They skipped the ritual getting to know you process, which is why everyone is a little off-put by the youth pastor with the hip new haircut, who wanders in talking about Jesus like they're their best friend. Because he's not. It's not a religion, it's a relationship, man. And that's true, but you haven't got that relationship yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're
Mm-hmm.
assuming a familiarity with God that is not warranted based on the amount of time you spent together. You see what I'm saying? And that is like the whole post-Vatican II church, the whole modernist movement, is like they rightly saw what they wanted to do, but they skipped over how you get there. It's just like when you play the music and you gotta play the scales first. You can't just jump in. You gotta practice first. When you start learning music, it's a formal process. I mean, mine wasn't and I suffer for it for not being classically trained. But nonetheless, in general, you go through a formal process. You sit down with an elder, someone who already knows how to play, teacher, a sort of musical pastor. You open the books. You do by rote. You go over the scales again and again, just endlessly. You learn the notes. You learn to read the music, and so on. But the goal of that is so you can forget all of that and just play.
Yeah.
Right. The goal of all that is so you so internalize it that then you just want to make a sound and you pick it up and you make the sound. And it's the same thing but you can't skip the steps, right? You have to do things rote for a while until it becomes so internalized that it becomes second nature. So, but the opposite of that is the trad guy who thinks that the point of religion is just to play the scales over and over again really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just want to go through they're so rigid, they just want to go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, religiously, over and over again and never mess it up. They just want to here's the ritual, we do the ritual over and over again, and they think that's the point.
I think there's a good analogy to be found here in marriage and family. You know, when you start dating a girl, it's very formal, and you should be respectful and observe certain boundaries, and then you progress to engagement and then to marriage, and then even in a new marriage, things can be sort of formal and nervous or whatever. You get used to your new stages of life together, but then eventually you become very familiar and you crack jokes and you fart in the bed or whatever. It becomes very informal as the relationship grows deeper. And then if you don't want to go through all that layers and ritual and getting to know you, and you don't want to do courtship and engagement and rings and weddings, you can go join a sex cult.
Yeah.
And have a ritual informality with a bunch of people you don't know.
Correct. Yes, and there's an equivalent when you get close enough to God, I think, of God farting in the bed near you. Which is he's okay, now I'm going to show you, what it, because you think about it, and there's some parts of creation where it just feels like that's God farting. Do you know, you look at, say,
I don't like this, the way you've taken my, my analogy and turned it into that.
Well, look, it's like a jellyfish, and you're just like, ew.
Yeah.
Ew.
Or just watching a rooster chase chickens around all day and wear them out in a ridiculous, comical way.
Yeah, in a ridiculous show of horniness.
Yeah.
And that's
it's almost
it's
almost embarrassing, to behold.
Yeah, it's embarrassing to behold, and then there's also parts of creation where you're just like, ew. And then but that is also, and we don't bring that into church on purpose, but in the private chambers, that's always there. When you go out into into and so the point is not to do the ritual really, really well. The point is to internalize what the ritual is meaning, right? The point is really to be on fire. That's the literal, to burn with like divine passion for life, fellow man, and creation. Like, and I mean to be on fire, like to burn with life, which is the same as saying to burn with God or the Holy Spirit, because life, the same thing. Like there's a story of the monks on Mount Athos, and there was a brother named Lot went to see his mentor, Father Joseph. And Lot said, brother, as far as I can, I stay in my office, I fast a little, I pray, I meditate, I live in peace as far as I can, purify my thoughts, but I don't know, I'm just not getting there. Like, what else can I do? And Joseph slowly stood up from his bowl of dinner. He stretched his hands toward the sky, and each of his fingers became as 10 lamps of hottest fire. And he said, brother, if you will, you can become all flame. Right? And that is, I think, literally possible. Like there's a mode of living wherein the divine fire burns through you so completely that you're actually like, that's why they always the halo, like the light is coming out from you. Like Moses, when he came down from the mountain, was emanating light.
Yeah.
Right? Emanating light. And you can get to that point in a literal way. The fire of all creation and life burns through you so completely that you're actually on fire. That like the Holy Spirit sitting on your, like that's, and that's the goal that all the formality is supposed to get you to. It gets you to the informal place, and then you're just you're like Brother Joseph there, but you can't skip the step, right? And that's how we unify the modernist and the trads. We say the modernists, their goal is correct, but the trads have the method. We put the halves back together, and ta-da, we solved it. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Ta-da! Schism over. We did it.
All right, great. I'll see you at Mass.
We did it. Schism over. We finished it. Now everyone is gonna believe us. See, you didn't think we'd talk about God's farts today, did you?
No, I did not.
I didn't think we would either. Ah! Did you hear that? That was weird.
No.
Okay. So, you wanted to talk about a thing that was. Did your request for help about what makes a good city get any?
I've had
feedback?
one good suggestion offered to me.
Ah.
So I don't think I have quite a list yet. So if you would
know
like,
why? Do you know why?
Why?
It's because people don't know what makes a good city. They probably heard that and were like, "Yeah, what does make a good city?" I'm not sure.
and they're all waiting for me to do the segment.
So they can know. Yeah, but see, that's the thing. No one knows.
You know, what I was hoping was that people were going to contact me and tell me something that's great about their city.
Uh-huh.
And then think about that a little bit and try to turn it into some kind of a rubric that maybe isn't so specific that it only applies to their city, but you can use that idea and apply it elsewhere. And so I'm going to give you another week to do that. So you can contact us at mapsoc, mapsoc.org.
Right.
And contact us and send us a little information. I do have a short list, but I'm gonna give them another week and see if anybody can tell me something interesting about the place they live.
Oh, good. And then you were saying, you told me something at the beginning, and then I forgot what it was.
Well, in 2 days or 3 days, I have 15 chickens arriving at my house.
Oh yes, congratulations.
Thank you. So we haven't talked about agriculture in a little while. And so since the first majority of our show was very, up in the lofty places, I thought maybe
Right.
we'd take it down to the soil and
Good.
wrap this show out talking about a little agriculture.
Okay.
So this is going to be about getting started with chickens, at least what I have learned and how I'm going to do it. And then maybe we'll update this, and I'll just let you know how it all is going.
Okay, so the first question, you're getting 15, right?
I'm getting 15
And they
chickens.
come when? Tuesday?
They're coming Tuesday or Wednesday.
Do you have a coop already?
I do.
Does your coop, are you gonna free range or mostly? What are you gonna do?
All right, let me kind of give you the rundown on the situation. So I'm getting 15 Buff Orpington chickens, which are a dual-purpose breed.
Buff
so you can
Orpington?
Orpington Buff.
I have to look these up. Oh, Buff Orpington.
Yes. So they're sort of a meaty laying hen. Okay.
Oh yeah, I know Buff Orpingtons.
So you can eat them if you so desire, or you can just keep them for eggs. Dual-purpose breed.
They've got nice. I believe the phrase is thick, with 2 C's legs.
Yeah, they are thick. They got badonkadonk.
Yeah.
So
Big booty chickens.
Right, and they're apparently very quiet and docile sort of breed. Good for living in something like a neighborhood where I live, where I'm not exactly in a tight, there's woods and stuff, but you don't want the chickens like chasing your neighbor's grandmother.
Are you getting a rooster or just hens?
Right now it's supposed to be just hens. Every once in a while you do get a rooster by accident. If I don't get one, I will eventually get one because I'm going to do the whole life cycle and have a reproducing flock. I'm going to do it all.
Do you know?
But I'm taking baby steps here.
Well, yeah, the rooster is an extra step because they're loud.
Yes.
If you just have hens, they're not loud. But you know why you accidentally get some sometimes? Because telling the sex of baby chickens is very difficult.
It is. It is quite difficult.
Listeners, you can go get certified in chicken sexing. You really can. And you will have a job at a chicken plant.
Yeah.
Because what they do is they put you on a line of all the baby chickens, the baby chicks that have just hatched, and you pick them up and you examine and see if they're a male or a female. And if they're a male, you throw them into a giant oven.
I think it's a shredder.
A shredder, like a mechanical holocaust.
Yeah, you just watch.
And then the little one, and then the girls you put on a thing because the girls, they want it for the egg factory.
Yep.
And they don't really have much use for all the chickens that are not going to lay eggs.
Really, just being a rooster in 2021 is an incredible overcoming of odds.
Oh, so much so. So much so. I mean, talk about privilege. Hen privilege. Because the hens don't get thrown into a shredder when they're babies.
No, they don't. They don't.
You know?
They don't.
Hen privilege. Okay, so you're getting just 15 hens.
I'm getting 15 hens. At least that's the plan. And so then the area of my property that is going to contain these birds is going to be surrounded by about 300 feet of fence. And then within that fence, I have a barn. So I kind of went big time on this. I needed a barn anyway. So I got a 10 by 16 barn, and I partitioned 5 feet of the end of it, walled it off, built a row of nesting boxes protruding from that wall, put in a door, and fitted it out to be a chicken house. And then I got a automatic chicken door that is powered. Oh yes, solar powered, and it operates on a photo sensor. And so it's going to open in the morning and close in the evening. And the chickens will train themselves, or I will train them to, go in and out at the right time. But they have, they're a heritage breed, so they have a good roosting instinct. They should take to it without a whole lot of drama. So I do have, now my building is dual purpose. That's going to be interesting because all my garden tools and all my chicken supplies are going to be in there. And we'll see if they get covered in dust and poop.
Oh yeah, they will be.
Well, we'll kind of just see how that goes. I may end up converting the whole building into a chicken coop and then having another barn for my garden tools. But, we're kind of taking this baby steps. Now, as I was looking into feed, I found that just about everything in my area is corn and soy based. And both for the health of the chickens and for the health of my family, I do not want to feed them a whole bunch of soybean. So I either need to go far afield and great expense in finding soy and or corn free feed, or I need to make it myself. I'm thinking about making it myself. So that will be an interesting endeavor in and of itself, and may turn into a little small business because there's a lot of like little hipster suburb chicken mommies around here that their chickens are kind of like pets, and they name them all, and they inspect their booties for their booty health and all that stuff. So if I can make the best chicken feed around and sell it to them, might have a little side hustle going on. Yeah, so there are opportunities arising here.
I have a friend that keeps the chickens, this lady, and she's a suburb mommy chicken keeper, and she feeds her chickens organic strawberries from Whole Foods.
Wow.
Which I said was a bit much.
Yeah.
Those are fancy chicken. But yes, but she does that in part because she can't find good organic chicken feed.
It's brutal out there. You go to the ag supply store.
She gets crickets from like the bait store and throws them in there.
Yep. Well, you can apparently raise mealworms pretty easily and in great abundance. Yeah. So that's another thing I might do is raise mealworms and feed them to my chickens or sell them to other chicken mommies in the area.
Yeah.
I think I just called myself a chicken mommy.
Well,
I'm already getting real. Yeah.
You are a chicken mommy. We used to have these things called what were they? Banshees. Banshee hen?
Bantams?
Banshee chicken. Yeah, Banshee chicken is this ridiculous small imagine like a dwarf chicken.
You're thinking about a bantam.
Nah, I don't think so. Maybe
it's a banshee well, small chickens are called bantams.
Maybe we called it wrong.
Yeah.
Because what used to happen before the internet is you would have something and someone would and then you would never hear someone say that name again. Mm-hmm. Because you'd buy it from like, this is a bantam chicken, and then you get home, and there was no way to ever look it up, and you're like, I think he said banshee, and then you just call it that for the rest of your life. That could have been what happened.
Yeah, it could happen.
So maybe I'm thinking of a bantam chicken, but when we had these little dwarf chickens who were. I guess they laid nice eggs, but they died all the time. They could not, their legs are stumpy.
Yeah.
I mean, a chicken is pretty easy pickings for like a fox or a coyote anyway.
Right.
And then like a midget chicken.
A tiny fussy little
chicken that has disproportionate legs. Would just be constantly eating. I'm not sure why we had them.
Because they're funny and pretty.
They are funny and pretty. Yeah. We also had. This may be wrong too. We also had Guinea Hens. Are you familiar with Guinea Hens?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Guinea, and they're from. I think they're from Africa.
They're apparently a good guard animal, are they not?
Well, what they do is they perch up on something and they just look around all the time. And if they see anything, they go wah, and they run away. So I guess they're like an alarm bell.
Yeah.
If something's approaching.
Right.
Because when they're not eating, they just perch up on something and look left and right. Like, is there something over there? Nope. And they just live for something to come around, so they go wah, whatever it is. It could be anything. So we used to have those. There's all kind of people don't realize how many different breeds of chicken there are.
Yeah, it's an incredible world of variety out there. Chicken breeding has gone insane.
Yeah, that's true with all livestock. There's as many breeds of cow almost as there are of dog.
Yeah.
You don't realize it because you think like, it's just cows, but there's so many breeds of cows.
Yep.
And people that are really into cows know all about the different breeds, just like people that are into dogs. I always wanted some beefalos.
Those are rad.
Yeah.
Or Scottish Highland. A buddy of mine has a bunch of Scottish Highland. They are so cool.
They are cool. I feel like they would be too hot.
Yeah, they seem to do okay. Yeah. But they do have long hair.
Yeah, they have luscious hair, really.
Mm-hmm.
I would describe the Highland cow's hair as luscious.
Yeah.
It's a hair that a lot of women would love to have.
So did you ever get any rabbits or anything? You still working on that?
Still working on it. We're still in the process of rabbits. And
So in our contest, I'm blowing you out of the water right now.
that's
Because you
true.
remember we're competing. Suburban agriculture competition.
That's true, but you know what? Yesterday, I bartered Amish friendship bread for some eggs. So
That's pretty legit. That's
I
5
got
points.
I got 5 points. I had
Yeah.
Amish friendship bread, which, if you don't know, is my wife is doing it. It's this bag of dough and yeast, and every day you like mash it, you punch at it,
Mm-hmm.
and you punch the dough to put air around in it, and then it makes more. It grows with yeast, and then eventually you separate it out into another bag, and then you punch that some more, and over time you have several bags of this continually perpetuating yeast pile
Mm-hmm.
of dough, and then and it has like spices in it, and then you give this away to other people who then will bake it or keep punching it and make their own. So you could potentially have like the same dough yeast culture going on for like generations.
Hi, friend. I got you this bacterial colony.
Okay, yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
I gave a bacterial colony to this lady. Actually, to the lady that uses the organic strawberries for her chickens. And she gave me some eggs.
Sweet.
So I got 5 points.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty legit. Well, if
Yeah.
any of our listeners want to tell us about their, suburban agriculture adventures, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. And now, before we close, I want to just address one thing.
Oh, boy.
And that is, is the Mars rover real? And I will say, I think that it is. But let's give some airtime to the idea that it isn't.
Okay.
Now, I will preface this by saying, I have personally been in the room with the guys driving Spirit and Opportunity.
Cool.
Like the original, not the original, but the ones that everyone like thinks about
Mm-hmm.
as the Mars rover. I was in the room with them while they were moving them around, which is not at all exciting. You'd think it'd be cool because you're like, oh, we got a robot on another planet.
Yeah.
But there's like an 8-minute lag from a signal to get from here to the rover, and then 8 minutes back. So you're like, I want to go over there. You're like, okay, let's go over there, and you say, move forward 6 inches. And then you wait for a half hour and see if it happened. And then, because you don't want to move far, because maybe you move into a hole.
Right.
So, it's very slow. So I don't think that was a big show, right? I think that was legit. But I hold out a small percentage chance. Like when people say it's fake, I'm like, I'll give you a small, because I know that throughout history, countries have gone to elaborate hoaxes for their own propaganda, like North Korea or China, communist China back in the day, constructing big fake towns that look very prosperous where everyone was healthy,
Mm-hmm.
with lots of food in the shelves, for the Western reporter to come through and be like, look, it's great. The USSR is doing great. Everyone here is happy. Look at all these beautiful people up there. And then but they just erected that last week. Right? And then that's a real thing that they used to do, by the way.
Yeah. It's a Potemkin village, right?
Yeah, they build these Potemkin villages, and then they would drive away having got their photo shoot, and then just a mile down the road is people living in a hovel. Right? So that sort of like thing has precedent of like this big show for propaganda purposes. And there's other times in history where that sort of thing has been done. So it is, I admit that it is possible that this is all some giant show. I don't think that it is. If it was, I don't feel like the guys in that room were in on it. But maybe, I don't put anything past people these days. But so let's think about how they would do it if they were going to hoax it. And then, because that makes all the difference. Once you see like a way that it could be done, then you think, oh, maybe it is done that way. So if I were a shadowy cabal, right? And maybe I am. I don't know.
Sure. Could be.
I might be a cabal. And I were trying to fake something to the public, like the Mars landing, to make them think that we are. People say, why would you do that? Well, to maintain the illusion of technical superiority over other countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one valid reason. Like, oh, we have robots in space. What do you have? You're going to take on the U.S., right? That could be one reason. You could come up with other reasons. But if I were going to do it, what I would do is I'd go to the NASA people and I'd say, hey, guys, I know that the rover hasn't landed yet, but we're trying to put together, we want to have a nice, like, footage for when it does. And we don't want people to be, like, we don't want it to look weird and people to be, like, too afraid and, like, nervous that it might. So we just, can we all just get in there and we're going to, just for photo purposes, we're going to videotape you guys acting like you are seeing it land. And that way we'll put it together later for the promo, but we won't do it till after it actually lands. And everyone goes, oh, okay, sure, that makes sense, right? Are you following?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you could talk them into it.
Yeah, cool. It'd be like, it'd be like, it's the same thing they do with you want stock footage available.
Sure. Yeah. It's pre-production. You have enough digital assets to make some good, some good promotional materials. Get people invested in NASA, recruiting purposes, that sort of thing.
Or here you go. You say, listen, they don't want the camera crews to be in here during the actual mission because they don't want anything distracting you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's for science.
So for science, we have to go ahead and film this now, and then when the actual thing happens, you guys will just be in there by yourself.
Yeah, we're not lying because we're actually going to do it.
Right.
It's just for convenience and safety.
So then you get a bunch of people to genuinely react like they have just landed the thing, and they clap, and they go, woo! And then, which they never look, I will admit they never look as excited as I would look as if I landed a robot on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoosh! Nailed it! I would be sitting there going, suck it! You guys, I just landed a robot on Mars! And I would just be pointing at everyone and be like, I win! Right? And
I just picture you in like a anime button-down shirt with like Gundams on it, jumping up and down on a desk.
I would jump up on the desk and strip my shirt off and be like, Brr! Robot on Mars! I win! Because then, for the rest of your life, no matter what someone said they accomplished, you'd be like, I put a robot on Mars.
Yeah.
And then you would just win. You just win for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just like, yay. Like, they're not, and that just could be because they're autistic. Maybe.
I don't know how to feel feelings.
I don't know how to feel feelings. Or maybe maybe they filmed it beforehand.
Perhaps.
You never know. I'm just saying this is how I would do it if I were a shadowy cabal. Then what I would do is I would take various footages from a desolate place on Earth, from a camera on a little car with wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And then put an orange filter over them and send them out to the public as though they had come from the red planet.
There you go.
And so then you say, well, that is maybe how you do it, but they're not doing that, right? Well, but people do realize there is a fake rover on Devon Island, Canada. No?
Is there?
There's 100%. Yeah, on Devon Island, Canada, which when you look at it's, how in Canada you go up and you go up and up and up north and it just becomes a bunch of like scattered islands.
Yeah.
It's one of those way up there and it's desolate. And when you look at a picture of Devon Island, it looks suspiciously like the surface of Mars. Sort of red clay, rocks. If you had a camera there and you took a photo, you could pass it off, and you put a little red sepia tone on it. You could pass it off as a picture from Mars.
Okay.
Not saying that they do, but you could. Right? And on Devon Island is, admittedly, they do not deny this, though they never talk about it very often, is a NASA camp. They have a couple of they have basically like a little NASA yurt and some NASA bunkers, some little NASA buildings and some cars. And they have a little rover with wheels on it and a camera. It says NASA. And it drives around there and takes pictures. And they agree that this is true. It's called the quote, and it is called, quote unquote, the Mars Project on Devon Island. Not making this up.
So I guess the idea behind this would be that they're testing and practicing developing rover technology.
Right. So their claim is, well, we do this because this is our rover testing ground. This is the place that's most like Mars on Earth. And so we put test rovers here to try and see like what sorts of things that we might want to put on the real rover. Very reasonable. But also, you could, if you're you could say, but wait a minute. What if these pictures are just from this thing? And then you're just saying, oh, this is just our project to prepare for the real one. And then you go, well, that would also be very feasible. Right? That's a way that you could hoax this no problem and have a perfect alibi. Yeah? Hmm?
So what if the crew that thinks they're running NASA rovers on Mars are actually running rovers on Devon Island? Nobody told them.
Well, see, that I don't think you can pull that off. Some people have said that. I think the people driving it have to also be in on it.
Okay.
That has to also be Potemkin Village, because it would at some point rain.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they'd be like, "Wait a minute, it's raining on," and they'd be like, "Shh," or maybe it does, and then they just shoot him in the head and they pull out another guy. You're driving it now.
Or Clive walks past the camera.
Or Clive walks. I mean, you couldn't keep this going for years without them getting
an albatross poops on the lens.
Right, you couldn't run. I don't think you could run a several decade-long rover Truman show without the people running the thing figure. Like, or it would, or just something as simple as, hey, the sun goes up and down at 24-hour intervals like it does on Earth, but it's not supposed to do that on Mars.
I guess.
Right, so I think that they would catch on. But they also at the Mars Project in Canada have little bases where they pretend that they are gearing up for and practicing for a Martian colony.
Really?
Where they have people that live with, and they have little spacesuits, and they put them on, and they go through mock missions of what you would do on Mars. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. So you do have a camp where you pretend to do missions in the desert. And they're like, well, yeah. And you have fake spacesuits. Yeah. And you go, oh, okay. I mean, there's a perfectly plausible reason for it, but then you're also going, oh, well, what if the moon landing footage is just from there?
So this is what happens when people have no ability to trust the government anymore, which they shouldn't.
Right, they should not.
Which they shouldn't. All our trust has been betrayed over and over and over again. But, if somebody's scoffing at the idea that maybe the whole Mars mission is just being faked on Devon Island, there are reasonable, good, valid reasons for thinking that it was fake.
There's lots of reasons for thinking the government is lying. Just about anything. Because they always are.
Yes. So like if we are really on Mars, it would be an outlier both in its success and in its honesty.
Right. Like you have to be like, oh, I mean,
because the government messes up everything and then they lie about it.
Right.
So if we actually succeeded in putting a rover on Mars and we were telling the truth, we being the government, that would be an incredible departure from ordinary government behavior.
Agreed. And
just saying.
Now as I said, I am on the pro rover camp.
Well, I think you're a sucker.
I may be. But I may just be doing that because I don't want to believe every single thing I've ever heard is fake. Right. I'm not sure, but I'm just giving this airtime because people need to think. It helps you to think about it. Like, you always need to question: did that happen? Did it happen? Because I don't believe in the moon landing, and I don't believe the moon landing not for any of the pictures with the shadows and stuff. I don't believe in the moon landing because when they got back, Neil Armstrong looked at the camera with the other two men and he said, "You can't see stars in space."
Yeah.
And I said, that is ridiculous and also contradicted by what the astronauts on the space station say, who say you can't see stars from space. That doesn't make any sense. Of course you can see stars from space. And so then then I was just like, okay, that's he's lying. Like that. And then you look at the photos and you're like, yeah, it does sort of look like they're on a set. And so then you say, well, is it possible that these rovers are also a set? Maybe, is all I'm saying. And all I'm saying is that Devon Island looks a lot like Mars. Look up pictures of Devon Island. And you're like, oh, yeah, I could see how that would be. And you could fake everything about it. Because people are like, no, in the photos on Mars, the horizon is closer to the camera. Because Mars is a smaller ball. And that's how you know it's real. And you go, no, you just take a picture going uphill.
Or you just change your lens. I mean, all of that is you can manipulate all that just with optics.
Yeah, it would be very simple to fake those things. So also like the guys driving have to be in on it because occasionally like a bird would land or something. I mean, there's just the guys driving it in that little place where I was at had to also be in on it if it is a hoax. Now it could have been a hoax. It could have been because I wasn't part of that project. They could have just had a Potemkin village. They were pushing off on people, and I was just in there going, "Oh yeah, look at all the groceries." Could be. I don't think so, but it could be. And when you look at, I'm just saying, when you look at Devon Island pictures. And then if you do the reverse and you apply like a blue filter to the Mars photos, it looks a little like Earth.
Well, I think we could settle this. Could settle this. I'm gonna call in an expert. Live here on the show. I'm gonna call in President Trump. Okay. Just hang tight. Hang tight.
Good.
Rape.
Oh, sorry. That was the wrong. That was wrong. That was the wrong number. That was Alex. Hang on. Okay, here we go. All right, Mr. President. All right, we've got him. Mr. President, I'm really sorry you didn't win the election, but I have an important question for you. Is the Mars rover program real?
Boom, these explosions of bullshit.
Well, there you have it. Straight from the president.
Yeah, maybe it is not. Maybe. Suplex contacted me when it landed and he said, "Is that legit? It looks like CGI."
Valid question.
I didn't prompt him. I just said, "Oh, I didn't even know it was happening." That's how little people care about these rovers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, "What? The rover thing." I guess I sort of heard that some months ago. And then I looked at it, it's like, yeah, it doesn't. I mean, there's just issues. One, Mars doesn't have an atmosphere really, so how effective is a parachute? Right. It lands with a parachute.
Good point.
And there's no, I mean, there's basically none. There's a tiny bit, so you could say like, oh, well, it helps them slow down a little bit. I don't know, maybe. I mean, if you did the math, it might work out. I haven't done the math. I'm not going to. I'm just saying it seems like if the air is that thin, I have trouble seeing why the parachute would even unfold.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the parachute's probably just to keep it in the right orientation to the ground rather than slow it down.
Yeah, maybe. But then,
like in Earth, we would use a fin.
But then on the
but...
Spirit and Opportunity, they claim there was this giant ball cushion. You know that?
Yeah, it's
and it would bounce. It would hit the ground and bounce, then bounce again, and then it would roll, and then they would get out and go, Rover, hello. Maybe. It's a very big. I've been more suspicious lately when Elon Musk sent his car up in the sky, and then said you can tell it's real because of how fake it looks. He really said that, and I was like, that's a bit. I don't know, maybe. that's so I'm currently in the pro rover camp.
Okay.
But when I look at pictures of people in spacesuits on Devon Island acting out Mars missions, Mars LARPing, I do have to wonder.
Well, I'm going to take the contrary position and say it's baloney.
Okay. Maybe, yeah. So, we solved Vatican II. We solved the traditional modernism debate. We learned about chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And we came to an indeterminate conclusion about the legitimacy of the Mars rover. So, Devon Island looks a lot like Mars, though. I'm looking at aerial pictures right now. It really is uncanny. I don't know. It's like red.
Well, if any listeners have any tips for a new chicken owner that maybe I can't get online.
Should we take a field trip to Devon Island?
Yeah, let's do it, dude.
I don't know. I don't really know how to get there. It's very up there. We'd have to go in the middle of summer and be frozen.
We could do some fishing on the way up. It'd be awesome.
I don't have a boat.
No, we'll just, there's lakes everywhere. We'll just, shore fish.
Okay.
Catch some muskie, some pike, some walleye. That'd be great. Let's do it, man. 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, 2-week trip.
Oh, did you get the picture of the Bigfoot I sent you?
No.
Oh, I sent you the finished picture of the Bigfoot.
What? The Bigfoot, like for merch? Awesome.